I don't think that aliens built the pyramids. I think that human beings built the pyramids because I don't think that we need aliens in order to be cool, creative, smart, strong, industrious, to do awesome stuff, whatever. I don't think, and I think one of the roots of, I think, when we go to an extreme, not that we shouldn't be extreme. It's okay to be extreme about some things. But when we go to an unrighteous place of why we're believing this stuff, when we go to a place where we're not believing it because the facts or because the spirit of the issue leads us there, we're following an unrighteous, unqualified spirit. We're following an unrighteous, unqualified idea. God has qualifications. He will give you an idea, but he doesn't just give it to you point blank, with absolutely zero, qualifications. No, what would you say? No limitations. No. It's like, for example, God says that you should do X, Y, and Z, but don't do L, M, and O, and P, L, M, N, O, P. You can do X, Y, and Z, but you have to be careful not to do L, M, N, O, P, because if you do that, then you will be breaking some rules. You'll be hurting something that you shouldn't hurt. So God might say it's okay to do X, Y, and Z as long as you do the right thing while you're doing it and you avoid L, M, N, O, P. There's a lot of examples. God said you're supposed to keep the Sabbath day. He did say that. But he did not intend for it to mean that if there's a starving man on the street, oh man, I can't carry a piece of bread across the street to my neighbor and feed it to him, because the act of feeding him and propping him up propping him up in my arms to feed him would be lifting, and that we can't do that. It's like God didn't intend for that. Jesus Christ, the Messiah, Jesus Christ, the Lord, I don't think he needs to be given any language. Jesus is universal to all languages. He's the Christ, he's the Messiah, he's the Savior, he's the Son of God. He came in and he talked a lot about the Sabbath day because he did a lot of things on Sabbath. He would walk around, he would pick grain. Hungry people can pick grain on the Sabbath day. You can do that which does not grieve your heart. You can do that which does not seem to you to be miserable and laborious. There are jobs which I love to do. I love to exhaust myself working on woodworking projects in my spare time. I sweat. It's hard. It's painful. But I do it and I love it. Some people, they love running. Running is the most fun thing for them. Running is painful. Running is work. But on the Sabbath day, do you think that a runner who loves to run is really breaking the Sabbath day? A musician plays music. Music is work. Music is laborious. Music involves a great deal of effort and time and practice and skill, and if you can't get it wrong, you have to do it right. Do you think that, I believe we all know that music is appropriate on the Sabbath day, but music is work. Jesus would help the poor and he would heal people, and he would tell people to get up and carry your mat, because what's wrong with carrying your mat? God said, yes, we should, put it back here. We should keep the Sabbath day, but he did not make that an unequivocal statement. God, now I'm getting off track, but I'm going to get back on track. God gives us commands. He tells us what's right and wrong. He gives us an idea to believe in. He gives us, commands to obey. He gives us ideas that are true of history and of spirit. Reality. But truth. But he doesn't just give it to us, carte blanche. He gives us qualifications and requirements and rules that go along with it. He gives us exceptions to the rule so that we don't abuse stuff. Now, how does this connect to pyramids? Well, it was kind of weird because I was posting a meme, and it was just a joke about pyramids, like how do we build the pyramids? You know, it was kind of funny. It was just a funny joke. It was completely nonsense. You know, there was nothing really historical about it. It was just trying to making fun of the whole thing. So I think they built from the bottom and built up. I think building from the top down would be difficult, don't you think? You know, it was pretty funny. And then all of a sudden, my art history teacher in class, the very next, that morning, I posted it the evening before, the very next morning, art history teacher, I didn't look at the schedule. I didn't realize this was what we're doing. How did they build the pyramids? That's kind of like a coincidence. That's probably not a coincidence, and you know, it wants us to disprove that aliens built the pyramids. I think that the pyramids are definitely pre-Egyptian and almost certainly pre-flood. I believe that the pyramids were built before the flood, before God sent judgment. I believe that the pyramids were built with a higher degree of technology than what the Egyptians were capable of. Because you know what? The Egyptians had nothing but copper tools for a long time. And copper tools are just no good for cutting just no good for cutting granite. And the pyramids are largely made of granite, and granite sucks to cut. In modern times, what do we use? We use diamond-tipped tools and carbide tools. And we use a lot of lubricant, like special oil lubricants. And we use lapping, which requires a high-speed rotary tool with a abrasive mixture. And we use rotary cutting tools, much like you would use to cut tile today. It's not an easy process. It's not something you really do with copper. Copper has a Mohs hardness scale that is very low, and granite has a Mohs hardness scale that's very high. You know, you might be able to use a heavy copper hammer to smash random chunks off of the stone, but you're not going to get, you know, precise cutting abilities because copper is just going to bend. It's soft. It's not going to do that job. I believe that there are more aspects of Egyptian technology, or whoever did build the pyramids, than we give them credit for. And I believe we are dealing with mental dissonance, intellectual dissonance about this issue, and we're sort of, it's like almost like a propaganda. They teach it like a propaganda, like this is something that must not be questioned. You must not question this question. You must not challenge this concept. Why not? Why can't the Egyptians have better technology than we gave them credit for? And, you know, why do we have to assume this? And I was supposed to write a paper about how do we prove that the aliens didn't have any involvement? Well, I don't think you can. You know, the chips in the stone do not tell me if the man who chipped it was an Egyptian or a Greek or a Mesopotamian. You know, anybody with a hand tool would make the same chip. And this is, bear with me, if an alien being came to the earth from a faraway place and had a hand tool and was chipping on a piece of stone to participate. If humans do things for religion, why can't aliens do things for religion? If humans go on pilgrimages, then why can't an alien go on a pilgrimage and build a pyramid? Anyways, the point is, when I went to Greece one time, you know, I got to step on the stones that Alexander the Great stepped on. Because Philip, his father, built that very same agora in, I believe it was Philippi. You know, that was built around the same time that Philip and Alexander were there. Alexander most definitely, almost certainly walked on it. And Philip certainly did. You know, people from Sparta walked on that. It's kind of cool. But you know, the Apostle Paul, I believe, you know, various, you know, Christian figures in the Bible walked on that same agora that Philip built. And you know, that's something we know from history, and it is alive. You can feel it. But it's not something that comes from the chips in the stone. I can't tell who walked on those stones based on, you know, the wear and tear that's on from the sandals that's on the stone. You know, if some aliens came from another planet and sat down and were watching the Egyptians build the pyramids, we wouldn't know the chips and the stones wouldn't tell us. If they gave the pharaoh advice like, hey, here's a better way to build that pyramid. Here's some architectural genius that you can know. We wouldn't know. It's just, our architectural, intelligence, architectural skill is kind of universal because the laws of physics are kind of universal. If they did or did not have had help, how would you know? How would you say, well, the Egyptians definitely learned how to level the ground by using the water as a leveling plane? Or, oh, an alien showed him that. You wouldn't be able to tell, okay? That wouldn't come through. You can't Can you prove that there were no Mesopotamians hanging out helping the pyramid? Can you prove that the Egyptians did not purchase wood and materials from Lebanon, much like King David did, to get wood, because Lebanon had a lot of wood? Can you prove that? Like, can you prove that there were no, far away, immigrants who came and worked on the project or who were present to witness it? They may have not written it down because most people didn't write things down, or if they did, they didn't get preserved. And so how would you know that? I feel like, besides, the Egyptian government is not very forthcoming. Just say, how easy is it to get an archaeological expedition to Egypt these days? It's not easy. For the last several years, it's been pretty hard. They make a lot of stuff as off limits. But the point is, I think there's a reason for that. But the point is, completely aside from, dirty dealings in the dark, and conspiracy is not a weird thing. Conspiracy is really an insult meant to marginalize people who ask questions like, hey, let's think differently about this. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist? Well, there's some really credible people out there. They're called police officers and FBI agents. And they have a definition for the term conspiracy. Conspiracy is something that they do all the time. Conspiracy is a small group of people working together in secret to do something that's not good. That's basically the definition of conspiracy. So if you are a conspiracy theorist, then you're someone who is suspicious that a small group of people have worked together, have cooperated together in secret to do something that's not good. If you think that President Trump colluded with Russia, then you're a conspiracy theorist because you believe that President Trump committed conspiracy, which was, in your opinion, and I don't believe that President Trump did that. I don't believe that. But in your opinion, it would be that you think President Trump cooperated with a small group of Russians in order to do something that was bad. I don't think that that's a true story. I think that it's fact. It's been proven that it's not a true story. There was never anything to it. It's proven fact that it's fake. But that is an example of a conspiracy. What's a true example of a conspiracy? Well, there's a lot of those. The conspiracy by Adolf Hitler and his elite to exterminate the Jewish people was a real conspiracy. The Armenian genocide was a real conspiracy. Watergate was a real conspiracy. Obamagate was a real conspiracy. The drugs and the weapons that were being run through the Benghazi embassy by the Clinton State Department, which probably provoked the militants to attack that embassy because of the drugs and the weapons going through that they didn't want. And we're not allowed to know what the CIA annex was doing at the Benghazi agency, but Clinton was okay with letting it burn. And the fact that Clinton and Obama and others in the White House were fully aware that our embassy was being attacked and ordered our military to stand down, do not rescue those Americans, do not get them out of there, do not send a helicopter to air evacuate them, do not send help, do not send a helicopter, do not send the police, do not send anybody to go make sure that they die. It's kind of like King David telling Joab, make sure that this guy stands in the front of the line of battle, and then tell everyone to pull back, to leave him alone so that he's exposed alone against the enemy, so that this guy dies because he knows something important he's an important witness, and I want him out of the picture. And that's basically that murder that King David committed is the same that Hillary Clinton and Obama committed, and many other conspiracies have taken place in history. Operation Northwoods was, go Google it. It's on Google. Everyone admits to it. The United States government admits to having tried to do this. It was a proposal for an operation. It was proposed to the office of the president, and the president rejected it. And he rejected it so vehemently that he made sure that it was public record so that it would be known on record. Operation Northwoods was a proposed action by the CIA. They submitted the proposal to the president to set off bombs in American towns to kill American citizens and then have a fake news story blaming it on the Cubans so that we would have a military justification to go attack and conquer Cuba. This is what the CIA was trying to get the president to sign off on. And the president said, no, I'm not going to sign off on this. This is vile. You're vile. You should be... I don't know if he fired them, but he should have fired them if he didn't. Anyways, and this was John F. Kennedy who rejected this, I believe. Anyways, that was an attempted conspiracy. And if the president had gone along with it, then it would have been a conspiracy. So, conspiracy is really, it's a liberal term, to be honest, but whenever, it's usually when people are doing something crooked and dirty and illegal and wrong and evil, and then they do it in secret, they do it in the back room, they do it under the table, they work together with their friends to try and take power and do something that's wrong. So, I don't think it's fair to accuse people of being conspiracy theorists if you believe a conspiracy theorist is another word for a conspiracy theorist is someone who's just suspicious that a crime has been committed, because by definition every crime that involves 2 or more people is a conspiracy. Crimes that involve 2 or more people, conspiracies, happen all the time. So anyways, I think that's just an insulting term meant to marginalize and silence people instead of having a real discussion. So I don't think you can prove or disprove that aliens were present anywhere, because forensic history is not the same as empirical history. Empirical science, forensic science and empirical science. You can have empirical science that helps out with forensic science. Forensic science labs do use empirical science in order to pursue forensic science, but forensic science and empirical science are different. I can study this Subway cup. I can study its molecular structure. I can get its weight. I can get its color. I can burn it to see how it burns. I can analyze it in a million ways. I can see how much gravity it has, because this does have some small amount of gravity. But what I cannot do is find out beyond a certain extent what happened to it in the past. I can't know how far this cup traveled unless I gain access to written documentation of that fact, and even then I would be required to trust that documentation. And even then, even if I knew where it came from, I would never be able to find out how many hands have held this cup. This cup has passed through many hands. Many people have picked up this cup, carried it, shipped it. Many people have looked at it. I would never be able to know who looked at it. I would never be able to know how many people commentated on this cup. I would never be able to know how many people had a say into how should this cup be designed. There's a certain amount that you can try to ferret it out. You can ferret out the truth, but only to a certain extent, and only within a certain reasonable amount of understanding. You can't really know everything. You can't be God and know history and all future. You just can't. It's not possible. It's not humanly possible. It's beyond our scope of what we're able to do. What we can know is know some things. So when I made my paper submission, I said, what can we know? And what can't we know? I don't think that human beings relied on aliens to build it. Did aliens? I believe that aliens are not really space aliens. I think that aliens are demonic entities. I believe that the spiritual is a thing that the whole world has been experiencing for a long time. It's always been around since the fall. took place. I think that, you know, when you're dealing with aliens, you're really dealing with the devil. And I don't know one way or another whether or not aliens or real aliens or spiritual aliens. I don't have any problem with real aliens existing. I just think that the ones that we experience are actually spiritual entities that are evil and are in rebellion against Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is the King of the universe and the Savior, and they hate him. It makes perfect sense to me that they would try to build a monument to a false religion in order to inspire people to worship that false religion and not Jesus. But I think that the pyramids are pre-flood. They did have some better technology than we give them credit for. At a minimum, you know, iron tools, in my opinion. I believe that it's not fair to condemn and mock and destroy and ridicule people just because they question things that you don't question. You know, how many people mocked and ridiculed Galileo as a conspiracy theorist, even though he was a Christian scientist who believed that the earth was round? And that the earth went around the sun and not the sun around the earth. It was heliocentrist, you know, in a day when not being a heliocentrist was a conspiracy theory. You know, there are debates within history and science. Science is not a monolithic entity. There are many varying, disagreeing groups who disagree on many things. One of which is the earth round or flat? Well, the earth is round, and we do go around the sun, but that has been an issue of disagreement. And there is a true answer to that that can be objectively known. The earth is round, is a spherical, and it goes around the sun. But what I'm trying to say is there is space inside of science and history that there has been disagreement over many, many things. There are competing theories. And one thing liberals like to do is they don't like that. They want to puff themselves up in an atmosphere of arrogance and then say, no one can question me. I'm the boss now. I'm the most prominent, you know, look at me, I'm so special, scholar, and so that means that no one can question my theory. If they do, they're an idiot. And I think that whoever has that kind of an opinion is an idiot, because your theory is probably wrong. You're probably mistaken about your theory, whatever it is. It could be anything. There's a lot of theories about history and science. You're probably wrong about your idea of string theory. String theory probably is a goose chase. I think it's probably not necessary in order to understand the universe. I think you're trying to over-explain something that is already self-evident, that already makes sense. You're trying to basically explain away God. You're trying to make the universe work without God and try to create. I think there's a religious motivation for it, because you're trying to create a universe where there would be multiple realities so that you can get away from God and get away from God's concept of a final judgment. Because if there's a million different versions of you in different realities based on different string theories, you know, creating multiple realities, then you wouldn't have to deal with God's judgment. There's a religious motivation to escape the reality of God that drives billions and billions of dollars of our science. How many space probes are sent out to other planets and other comets and stuff for the sole purpose of trying to find evidence of evolution out there? And their definition of evidence of evolution, if you found life, then you would say, oh, well, see, it evolved. You know, you're trying. If there's life out there, then God made it. If there's life out there, then Jesus Christ caused it to come into existence. But you know, we're forced into certain viewpoints, and if you're not, then you're just ridiculed as an idiot. But I think that's not fair. I think, you know, so basically, I have a synthesis view. I think, and here's where I'm going to get back to my original point. I think we go overboard. I think, you know, some people say, oh, you know, the aliens must have built the pyramids because there's no way human beings could do that. So it's an unqualified spirit. It's a spirit of man. We're just going to surrender our humanity to the aliens. The aliens, these things that we hold in such great esteem, they're the ones who give us all of our really good ideas, everyone who's really smart had some contact with them. We can't be humans, intelligent humans on our own, and that's wrong. Of course we can be. God made us intelligent humans. Humans are very genius people. God made us that way because God is a very genius person. He gave that to us. And they just they come from a very unrighteous place, and they discredit the whole field of inquiry to say, well, aliens must have built the whole damn thing and been a primary, instrument that it was built with. Well, no. I think human beings built it. I think that they had some good technology that we don't give them credit for. That at least iron tools. At least. I think that they probably had at least iron tools. At a minimum. And I think it took a long time, not within the lifetime. I think it would have taken at least 30 years more. It would have taken a very long time to build that. I don't think it took so quickly. I don't think it happened so quickly. So there's the two extreme viewpoints, that there cannot be any aliens, and that there cannot be any spiritual involvement of what's going on, or any possibly true extraterrestrial involvement. You can't have an imposter alien, you can't have a real alien, you can't have a spiritual source, you can't have a physical source. It has to be completely simplistic answer. Has to be like so simplistic that we're proud about it. That it has to be, they were carrying these things on sleds over the ground because they poured water on the sand to make it smooth. Can you carry rocks that way? Yes. Did they do that sometimes? Yes. Is there any proof that they did that on the pyramid? Not really. We find some inscriptions of people carrying, stones on sleds on wet sand. We do find those in some wall paintings of the hieroglyphic wall art, but we don't have any connection there that it was done on the pyramids. You can hypothesize that maybe it was, but you couldn't know that for sure. We see that there were, domiciles and villages and barracks for people working on this location. And by the way, most building sites throughout history, most ancient cities, most building sites, most archaeological sites, have multiple stages of construction over time. You can't say, well, the pyramids, the whole pyramid structure was built at one time. The pyramids were built at one time, and the temples and various, other buildings that are connected to them were built at different times. It's a process. It's a process that has layers and periods of construction. Stonehenge itself also, it's so much more simple than the pyramids, but it also has different layers and time periods of construction that came and went. We can't really assume that just because I think that the barracks and the cities, the little villages of workers were later on. I think that the pyramids were always there, and that the Egyptians sort of adopted it. I think that when there's a culture that comes before us, and then new people move in, we adopt some parts of that culture. I think when the barbarian tribes of Europe came and conquered Rome, yeah, they conquered Rome, but then they adopted most of the Roman culture. And I'm not so sure how much of that came from the pyramid builders to the Egyptians, but I think the Egyptians sort of got inspired. The pyramids are very inspiring, and sort of inspired them. And I think that when we say that what is it called? The horizon of Khufu. Yes, Khufu is a king. Kings are kind of arrogant people. They take credit for stuff that's not always theirs. It's their country, so everything in it must be their credit, Kings take credit for everything that's in their country, whether they did it or not. Kings take credit for the mountains, rivers, and valleys in their country, even though they had nothing to do with building those mountains, rivers, and valleys. Say, I have such a beautiful country. We have such strong mountains and forests that provide us so much food. I'm a great king. Yeah, but you had nothing to do with that. I think that Khufu refurbished the pyramids. I think he built extra buildings and complexes and stuff adjacent to it and connected to it. I don't think that Khufu built the pyramids themselves. The three Great Pyramids. I'm not saying that the Egyptians didn't build other pyramids. I think that the Egyptians were trying to emulate the pyramids. I believe that the learning curve of the sort of imperfect pyramids that we find, and which are of inferior quality to the Great Pyramids, the three Great Pyramids anyways, I believe those are a learning curve of Egyptians trying to emulate, trying to copy the Great Pyramids, which were built by a previous civilization. I think a pre-flood civilization, but they're before the Egyptians, for sure. And one reason we know this is that there's no hieroglyphs on the inside. The Great Pyramids, there's no hieroglyphs in there. There's not a single place that the Egyptians do build on large state or religious buildings that don't have hieroglyphs, and yet the inside of the Great Pyramid has none. And this is supposed to be a burial site. These people are these are Egyptians. These are people who believe that if you do not have magic spells inscribed on the walls of your tomb, then you're not gonna have an afterlife. Okay, this is something that they believe in. It's necessary to them. I think that for whatever it was, maybe an astronomical observatory, you know, whatever the reason, maybe I don't know, a religious thing. I don't think that, think about it this way. The Egyptians are people who believe that the insides of their tombs are always going to be looked upon because they believe that the Ka of their soul is going to be wandering around inside the tomb, back and forth from their little idol of themselves, back and forth for a long time looking at the insides. They don't make it plain and boring, they make it decorated. It's on purpose. Why would you make it plain and blank on the inside of the Great Pyramid if this is supposed to be a place of burial? And I see these scholars who say, well, the whole thing is empty. That means that there must have been. It's a lot of after the fact, therefore before the fact. The insides of the Great Pyramid are empty. There's no gold. It must have been stripped clean. That's why this is proof that it was full of gold and made to be on purpose the tomb of a great pharaoh, because it was stripped clean, because we see that it's bare and empty. We see that it is bare and empty, therefore it must have been stripped clean, therefore it must have once been full of gold, therefore it must have been the resting place of a king. But that's a lot of assumptions, don't you think? Maybe the pyramids had some other function, or were just made as a monument, or were made as an astronomical wonder. As, people who revered the stars and wanted to make an astronomical or a religious item that they did not expect anyone to be on the inside of it. Egyptians make tombs that are full of inscriptions because they expect the soul of the dead man to be in there forever, looking at the walls. The people who built the pyramid probably did not intend for anyone who's intelligent to be on the inside of that thing, trapped or not. They didn't expect anyone to be looking at the walls, so they didn't decorate them. I think that we make a lot of assumptions we're not allowed to question, and I think human beings built the pyramids. I don't think you can deny, however, we can't prove that aliens advised, we can't prove that aliens did not advise. You can't prove that Egyptians did not, get the help of Mesopotamians, who were very skilled at building ziggurats. Very skilled at that sort of thing. You can't prove that they didn't have some Mesopotamian workers, or some Canaanite workers, or some Greek workers. You can't prove that some Minoans didn't come down and visit and give advice, or watch, or take some paycheck for some food, to chisel on some stone for a while, and then go back to Crete and Minos. You can't assume that. We don't know. The chips in the stone don't tell us. We can find an ancient Egyptian cup, and an ancient Egyptian house, and an ancient Egyptian utensil of maybe an eating utensil or a game. You can't assume. We don't know if Egyptians played it, or if maybe a Greek or Mesopotamian may have played that game once or drank from that cup. The chips in the stone don't tell us. So I think that when we go, and now I'm going to come back to my original point, which I know I've been rabbit trailing, but it's okay. The original point is we have these unqualified statements that don't have any exceptions. And so we refuse to have a synthesis view, and we refuse to follow God's inspiration. Because whether it is extreme or not, whether it is a synthesis or pure, one way or another, if God tells us what something is, then that's what the truth is. And we refuse to seek God when we're trying to find historical truth, and we instead follow our own radical ideologies. There's radical simplism. Radical simplicism, being radically simplistic, that it has to be humans with barely more than Stone Age tools, just copper tools, doing it the hard way. Could they? Maybe, but I doubt it. I am very skeptical of that. I'm very skeptical of the stone ramp covered in water and sand, pulling 2-ton stones up the ramp. It's not the most efficient way to do it. Could you possibly do it? Maybe, I guess so. But it would suck, and it would be a stupid way to do it. It's not a smart way to do it. And if you're going to be an engineer, you got to do it smart. You work smarter, or not harder. That's the whole point. Oh, man. But do we have the other opposite view, that aliens built the pyramids with anti-gravity technology? Well, no, I don't think so. Can you disprove that fact, though? I don't think you can disprove that. There are hieroglyphs in these temples that do depict airplanes and flying saucers and what appear to be aliens and spaceships. We're not allowed to look at those. Those are areas that are roped off, and you're not allowed to walk in there. Tourists are not allowed in certain sections of the temples of Egypt when they're visiting on the tour, because these are the sections that have weird pictures we're not allowed to look at. Okay? We do have Baghdad batteries and stuff. There was electricity back in the day. There's always been electricity because the laws of physics don't change. So, I hope that my video just says a synthesis view can give you more of an idea of common sense here, that everything is not all the one way or all the other. There's a lot of truth in the middle. And even if it was entirely man-made, and it probably is, and it's my opinion that it's entirely man-made, you can't deny that maybe it's not even possible. There's no forensic or empirical way to disprove it. That somebody, whether another nationality, Mesopotamians, Greeks, Canaanites, somebody had some advice for the pharaoh about how this can be built and helped out, or just took a stone tool and helped out, or that you can't also deny that if there was aliens, that aliens did the same thing either, because you can't disprove that a Greek did, so how can you disprove that an alien did? You don't know. The Greeks have their own massive, ancient, historical structures, such as the Cyclopean Wall, the Cyclopean Walls, that and similar structures that in Mycenaean era, we don't know how they built it. It was very, very advanced. It's very intelligent. Couldn't they have had some advice? Maybe. The Incans did the same thing. The stones won't tell us. So, how can you tell us? I'm not proposing that we have to believe my theory or any particular theory. I'm saying we should be open to question. It shouldn't be an object of ridicule and scorn to have a different viewpoint on such a obscure historical topic with so little written documentation about it. And here's one more thing, I want to leave you with this. Just because something happens doesn't mean that people in the government always record it and publish it and make it public. Not everything that... I live in the United States. My government doesn't publish everything that they do and make it open to the public. We have a Freedom of Information Act, and they still abridge and moderate and delete and black out entire sections of papers. Oh, fine, we'll release it to you, but the whole thing is blacked out. Governments don't do that. Just because, governments like good publicity. And if a king can get some good advice from a smart person, whether he's from Mesopotamia or somewhere else, and then take credit for it himself, then his people give him all the credit. He gets the credit, he's the king, he likes that. That's what kings like. They like to get credit. They don't like to share credit because they're the king. They're the center point of the universe, of their kingdom. So just because the Egyptian government, which didn't have a bureaucracy like we do, which is dedicated to recording stuff, his bureaucracy was probably not dedicated to recording everything that we would consider important, because they had a different consideration. As long as the day-to-day business is fixed, as long as the king knows what's going on, the rest of the common people don't necessarily need to know what's going on. We don't need to have secret documents and files. Pharaoh's secrets cannot be revealed if Pharaoh doesn't record them. You know, why should we make clay tablets revealing his secret backroom dealings, or who gave him advice on how to be a better builder, if he can just know it in his head? Thank you, sir. Now go away from my kingdom. Thanks for your help. And then take credit for it himself. You know, I think we can attribute arrogance and selfishness and pride to people. I think that's not a strange claim to make. And you know what? I believe that when we're talking about the horizon of Khufu, I think that Khufu was probably inspired by these pyramids. I think he was probably in love with them, in a metaphorical sense. He really liked them. He liked them a lot. He thought that they were a great tribute to his kingdom. He happens to rule the kingdom that has one of the 7 wonders of the world. It's great. It makes him special. I think that he probably refurbished it and built a lot of adjacent buildings to freshen up the place. I don't think that he built the pyramids, but I think that when he calls it, he's a king. He lays claim to things. A definition of kings is that they lay claim to the land and everything in it. He didn't build the pyramids, but he claimed them. They said, these are my pyramids because this is my kingdom, this is my land, and everything in it is mine. And I'm the king and I'm the pharaoh, and these pyramids are it's like my flag. We have the American flag. Well, this pyramids is like my symbol. This is the horizon of Khufu. This is amazing. This is my thing. I'm a great king. I have a very great amount of ma'at. You know, if you know Egyptian stuff, you know what I'm talking about. M-A-A-T. Well, you know, just because, and we do have written records that reference the horizon of Khufu, which is supposed to be a reference to the pyramids. That doesn't mean he built it, it just means that he laid claim to it. You know, there are kings of the British Empire. They didn't spend that time building the fleet, but the predecessor did. His father built the fleet. The son is now the king, and now this is my fleet. I'm the king of the strongest navy in the world, but you didn't spend all the time building it, your father did.